Call the meeting to order. This is a special call budget work session, Jackson County Board of Commissioners. Got several items to go over to get some updates as we're trying to finalize their budget. I'll recognize our county manager, Mr. Adams.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. So as I started putting this information together, I was going to hand it out to you and just single sheets, and Angie stepped in the way and actually helped organize me a little bit. So I appreciate Angie as far as putting the books together for you. So you should have, this is really just following up and finishing discussions that this board has had in regards to your upcoming budget vote. And so the first item is the Silva Fire Department discussions. And so I just basically included in your packets, it was a letter that was written from me to the town of Silva in regards to what this board verbally agreed to as far as funding for a full-time fire department for the Silva Fire Department serving the district. And so as you can see, just letting them know that you all had approved $1,074,290 to go to them for a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation with a minimum of eight full-time employees. I keep emphasizing that because I think ultimately in the future, our conversations with the town of Silva needs to be about what we are funding them to move forward to provide fire protection, not necessarily stuck on the amount of people, because they as an individual entity have the ability to make the final decision. Our funding is basically stating that we are asking them to employ a minimum of 8 full-time employees. But I also go through and just mention the other items that we normally fund, our operational items, our debt service. Also talk about that in return for this funding that they're to cover the existing Silva Fire District and provide mutual aid assistance as needed. I do go on to say that my last sentence here is that we look forward to our continued partnership with the town of Silva to provide excellent fire protection to our citizens. One of the messages, I did get a phone call from, I think you did too, Mr. Chairman, from WLOS or WSO or WLOS. And this is a positive thing for our community, meaning we're getting full-time fire protection for the Silva Fire District. So this is a positive conversation and moving forward with improving services to our citizens.
Yeah, and I clarified to them today that, because he said, the reporter I spoke to said, I understand you have voted to approve this for the Silva Fire Department. And I said, that's incorrect. As your letter states, I said, we have consensus to include it in the budget. The official vote will not take place until the budget is ratified, and then it'll be effective July 1. So technically, no, we have not voted on that.
And the letter does state that because of our budget process, we needed the town of Silva to actually move forward and make an official action on whether or not they intend to accept the offer or not. And so you can see the second letter is a letter written from Paige Dowling. Excuse me, that's rusty. Paige Dowling basically stating that the town did meet and that they did discuss it and they are willing to accept, and they are accepting the offer of the $1,074,000 and agreeing to provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service with all the elements that I just mentioned before. So again, assuming this board moves forward with your vote on the budget, then this is a great service to the citizens of the town of Silva and also service district. That's all I have. I'm not just giving the board an update, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have any questions or?
In a conversation, Mr. Adams, you and I had, is that about 80% of the budget for town of Silva's?
Yeah, it's approximately, if you got the numbers, it's a little over a $1.3 million total budget. And the $1,074,000 is a little over 80%. I believe it's about 81% of the total budget. I can go back and confirm it, but I know it's over 80% of the total
their budget for the fire.
For the entire budget. If you go back, I'll tell you what, I can do it like this right here. I've got it in here, previous. Fire department paid. Let me make sure I'm looking at this right.
While you're looking at that, I'd just like to make the comment that I appreciate Chairman McMahon and you mentioning that it's the Silva Fire District, because I've had to explain to several people, why are we doing this much for Silva? It's so small. And I said, oh no, it covers Webster, Dillsboro, that fire district is a larger area.
60% of it is outside the municipal boundary.
Yes, and I think that's helpful for people to understand.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
So just a reminder that the overall budget is $1,321,500, almost $16 right there. This is the budget that was presented to the board. The proposed funding from the county is $1,074,290. You can't go up there, as you were stating, Commissioner Woody. You can see that the town of Dillsboro is contributing $21,278, Webster $19,128, Silva $198,719. So out of the entire budget, did you say it was
81.29%.
81.29% is funded by the county, being proposed to be funded by the county.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Next item is item 2, Glenville Cashers Rescue Squad.
Yes, just wanted to let the board know that they did come back and they got their interest rate finalized, and they do have a revised version of it was not to exceed 4.5 million. It has moved to 4.6 million. That is a request and recommendation from the manager's office to go forward with it. The new interest rate. The debt that we have, or debt service payment that we have budgeted, will still make the payment for a $4.6 million budget versus a $4.5 million budget. Do you have that interest rate? I'm with you. Yeah, 3.6, 3.7. So what's included in the recommended budget does allow for us to move forward with making the debt service payments for a $4.6 million bill.
Just so the commissioners know, this second rescue squad building, do y'all know where the location is? And if you've ever gone through Cashers in the summer months, and the traffic from Blue Ridge, up where Blue Ridge School is, usually starts down by Slabtown Road. I'm talking both ways. It'd be almost impossible for a rescue squad, emergency vehicle, to get through that area. And you're looking at about a third of a mile, probably pretty much from the heart of each of those of that 107-64 intersection. So it's time is in the summer months to just getting one end of town to the other, and this would allow so much, because that site, they'd be able to go behind the farmers market on that little dirt road and come out on 107 heading south. They can go down 64 east or west, and can get up to 107 north to a degree with traffic. So that's a strategic, great location for a facility right there in that spot.
If it's okay with the board, we do have Mr. Parker here with us tonight, and if you don't mind, I'll jump down to the solid waste revenue portion of this conversations, and you'll see that's attachments 3A, 3B, and 3C. Or excuse me, I'm sorry, attachment 4. Attachment 4. So what you have on your first page there is what we're attempting to do here is try to bring before the board what we believe our potential anticipated costs would be, our increased costs going into the next fiscal year. So if you recall, I said the majority of our costs are going to be related to fuel. And so as we proceeded forward, we were trying to give fairly good estimates, or as best estimates we could, about what we thought costs would be with our increase with fuel and also CPI indexes. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through this information, and at the end, I want to talk to you about, because these are estimated cost increases in which they're estimated. So I cannot tell you in 6 months from now what fuel will be. Fuel could go significantly down, which would reduce our costs, or it could go a lot higher. We just don't know. But if you go through and look at what's trending right now, our transportation costs could increase 40 to 60%. And that is based upon fuel. That would end up being an additional $440,000. We're currently seeing, we're seeing the 40 or 60% right now. It's the 40% right now. And so we're just trying to build in an estimate. Now, if you scroll down and look at the SRC operational cost and the equipment cost, we feel more comfortable with that 7 to 10% estimate there. Because, if you basically look at last year's CPI increase of 7.4, and if you look at what's happening this year, it seems to be trending higher than 7.4. I would say that that's going to be a more accurate number in regards to additional costs associated with our SRC operations along with the equipment. And then if you also flow down and look at our tipping fee cost, that's our cost going for our landfill costs in Homer. We also feel fairly comfortable with that percentage increase. The only way that really goes down is if we do find another landfill that could come into competition, and we are still working on that. But for right now, that we're fairly confident with those increased costs there. What we're not confident with is the fuel, and it's an unknown. And so what we did was we attempted to, if you go to the next page, um, what we attempted to do was we wanted to provide you some information in regards to what other counties are charging. And that was a question that was asked at a previous meeting. And so you can see in Haywood County, household availability fees is $159 per household. You can see here in Jackson, we try to break the cost up based upon the size of your house. So a 1 bedroom is 72, 2 to 3 bedroom is 97, 4 bedrooms 121, 5 bedroom 144. Mobile homes 97, apartment units 97, campsites $5, and hotel motel rooms $5. You can see Macon County availability per household is $108, and you can see the Swain is $75. Now, when you sit and look at service, thank you, sir. When you sit here and look at service, and we try to compare ourselves to other counties for services, ultimately, I would argue that Jackson County provides as good, if not better, service to our citizens than the other counties. So, for example, Chad, if you compare convenience sites in Haywood versus ours, what's the difference? Like Haywood, what services are offered in Haywood convenience?
Basically, Haywood Macon offers services for bag garbage and recyclables, like your bottles and cans and your paper. But we have, you've seen what we have here. You have quite a bit more that we collect on your sites.
Plastics
And then Swain County doesn't. They don't have. Do they have convenience sites?
They have one site.
They have one site. So when you start trying to look at fees, you also have to look at services, and then you can see the per ton does vary just depending upon, obviously what county you're in and so forth. So you can see that Swain is $80 a ton. You look at Haywood, they're $55 a ton for the transfer station, but they also have a landfill there that they're able to be a little bit cheaper. And then obviously we're at $64 a ton for our construction waste itself. And so you can see that I would consider ourselves fairly comparable, especially since the services that we provide to our citizens. The next page is, I'm going to scroll real quick back to the first page. You can see we're projecting up to $632,000 of potential losses or increased costs next year. Again, with the majority of that not being known because of fuel. So what we did attempt to do was we did attempt to go through and start looking at our fee schedule just to see where we could potentially increase certain fees. And quite honestly, the vast majority of this proposal here would fall within the 2 to 3 bedroom you can see right there, that really is, if you look at the number of units that are out there, obviously, if you jump up from 197 to 125, which is still cheaper than, say, Haywood and other areas, you can see that gives us the majority of this increase. Everything else is fairly incremental. And then we would look at being incremental and going up the per ton fee. You have to be careful with your per ton fee coming across the scales. If you get too high with that, things tend to either many landfills tend to start popping up, or sometimes they can go to other counties. Now, to some extent, uh, you would think, well, why is that bad if they go to another county? We do need certain volumes to maintain our overall operational cost at our transfer station itself. Now, one of the things when I first started talking to the board about this, we were still finalizing where we thought our expenses would be. And really, here in just the last week, Darlene's come back to me, and we're actually stabilized this year, and our fund balance is going to be maintained this year. And we do have a good fund balance. We have a good fund balance of about $1.5 million in this fund. I know 1.5 cent. It's actually a good fund balance for this operation. But just also to note that we can have major expenses in these operations that are hundreds of thousands of dollars that sometimes are unknown. Now, Darlene and I really talked about this morning. There's two approaches this board can take in regards to this. One is to utilize what we're considering estimates. And again, I keep reiterating, this number right here is just an unknown number. And I'm not going to know that number, quite frankly, until we get our new contracts set in January. And obviously, we'll see what fuel has done at that time also. So I do believe come January or February, we're actually going to have a much better idea of what existing costs are going to be and what future costs will be at that point. So if the board wishes to delay this conversation, then what this would be a planned spend down of our fund balance. Now, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to ask Angie to show me the minutes before she brings if the board chooses to take this alternative. What this is if we do a planned spend down, then what that does is that pretty much we will know by next budget year what these rates really actually should be. Now, the only, I wouldn't say dangerous, but what this really does mean, though, is when we go into next year, that if these projections are anywhere correct, then we will need to seriously look at fees next year. But there is some logic to what I'm saying here for the simple fact that $440,000 is completely unknown at this point. And we could survive a year of a spend down of $600,000 to $700,000, but understanding that we would have to look at fee increases like this. If or I just don't know what it'll be because I just don't know what fuel will do. And so at this point, the safest route would be to look at fee increases right now. But if fuel went down 3 months from now, I was asked this question outside of this meeting, could we change these rates after July 1? And the answer is it would be very difficult to do so because these availability fees that we're talking about here. So, for example, if you have a mortgage on your house, I know that people who own their house, they may not pay their taxes and their availability fees until January, whatever that date is. They wait till that last day so they don't accrue interest. But a lot of people who have mortgages, they pay when the bills actually due, which is generally, when is that? September. So no, it would be very difficult to go back and readjust these rates after you've set it, say January, February. You'd be going down the line of giving a lot of refunds and things of that nature if you attempted to do that. So it's actually, if there's a thought about trying to wait and see about what's really going to happen to us with fuel, you'd really have to wait the next fiscal year.
But the way our contract reads now, we have a fuel escalation charge.
Mhm.
So we don't even know, it could change if we went with the same kind of contract where you have that fuel escalation charge, that could change no matter what the fuel does.
Correct.
So there's always going to be an unknown. It's always a guessing game. I think we know it's high now, and I don't think we have any choice but to adjust the rates. I feel more comfortable adjusting the rates now, knowing what we know, as opposed to rolling the dice and spend our fund balance down, and then something big happens, and then we got to rely on that fund balance and it not be there. So I'm perfectly fine with adjusting the rates incrementally, like you've suggested, offset the potential increases.
Okay.
How does other board members feel?
I understand your logic, no question about it. I'd almost see like a compromise, because that 28% on increase, it's $30-some dollars, or maybe not quite 30, $28 increase, but that's pretty significant to 2 and 3 bedroom home people. And I can see maybe cutting that down from 28 to 14% or 15%, and using utilizing the fund balance and not such a high increase. It's my thoughts.
Is this just the proposed, or this is the current, what you're showing on that chart? Roll back up, Don, that chart.
That is the current.
That's the current. Okay.
Proposed is right here. So it's 97 to 25, 125.
Those other increases,
That's per year.
Yeah, that's a one-time fee.
It's a one-time. Well, I just from the information we've gotten right now, I agree with Chairman Matt Mahan that I feel it would be better to do it now. People's understanding of the cost to transport is in everyone's forefront right now. It would not appear like we're doing something arbitrary or trying to just get some money. What we're trying to do is protect our community and offer this service. And that increase will allow us to continue the service that we have. The cost is up for transportation.
Yeah, and that's where I'm just trying to, be as open to the board and the public as possible. This is just such an unknown number here that's why it's so difficult to predict. Because I agree, whatever new contract we go in is going to have a fuel escalation charge. So next year, 2 things we're going to deal with is renewing the contract, which could have cost increase, and then you still have the potential fuel escalation at that point too. And we just don't know until we actually go through the bid and go through the process of trying to renew all these contracts.
So if what you're saying is, we know the fuel's high, but the new contract could come in higher too.
Correct. And these are all the unknowns I just don't know. I'm comfortable with these numbers, but this transportation costs are the ones that are just really unknown. We're trying to predict 40 to 60% here, but we just don't know.
and it's possible that if we went with, if we changed the fee, increase our certain fees, then we may have to revisit those fees again in the year when we renew the contract.
What you're saying is,
January 1st. So we'd have to pay for those 6 months until we could raise the fees again if we had to.
but I think what you're asking, Mark, is what if this number got drastically higher? Yeah, the cost got drastically higher than what's being projected here, then yeah, we have to do that every year as far as reviewing your fee schedule.
And we may have to come back and ask for a general fund contribution if it doesn't cover the cost.
Well, it's going to cover. We got that 1.5 million. Right? Okay. Under these numbers, we feel like that wouldn't happen, but yes, there are just so many unknowns here. I can't tell you if you raise rates this year that we don't have to evaluate them next year. I won't know that till next year.
And that
It's only 60%, yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to just be as open. It's the safer bet. It's the safer thing is to raise rates. If you don't want to do that, then it would be a planned fund balance expenditure with the understanding that it emphasizes, again, your scenario, Mark. What if it costs double the amount? Then now you're not looking at a 20% increase in 1 year. You're looking at a much higher percent in that 1 year.
Lois, how do you feel? Okay. Tom?
I would, I would look at, I'm thinking like Mark said, instead of going with $125, why don't you go with 110? I mean, because that is your largest amount of homes, 16,841 of them.
That's
that,
true.
Like Mark said, that's the ones that are gonna get hit the hardest. So even even at 110, I mean, I didn't get a calculator to do it, but that'd still be substantial amount of money without getting gouged, you know?
Figure that out. Can you figure out what that is?
So do you, you're saying just on that one
Just
change?
on, yes, just on one.
Well,
The
If
2
we
and 3
did-
bedroom,
mobile homes.
because like you said, that's almost a 29% increase. All the other ones, except for the mobile homes and the apartment units, went up to 28.
Did you think it was tomorrow?
That would increase $218,000.
It would reduce 218
No, it would give us $218,000.
total, not the 631 and get 218. So that would reduce this. So let me make sure I understand what you just said. That would reduce that 631 to 218.
Yes.
Okay. So just so we understand, I understand we're talking about percentage wise, but that's also why we went and looked at these certain areas. A couple of things, like we did not propose businesses, right? You can see businesses there because it's such a small amount of revenue, right? That if you went up a few dollars, you get such a small amount of revenue from that. You get a lot of complaints and issues with that. The reason you target these areas because obviously it is the most amount of people. What that does is that reduces that 631 down to $218,000. So it's $400,000 less from what. And I just throw that out to you because the reality, there's not a perfect answer here, but the reality is if you're going to reduce that by $400,000, then I would say why wouldn't you just wait till next year? Because the reality is you got it down to 200,000, and I know costs are going to go up. So what I'm saying is this is an unknown, but I know costs are going to go up. Okay, so the reality is if you reduce the overall revenue from 600,000 to 200,000, then I think you're still that is drastically increasing your chances of looking at fees again next year. Now, again, Mark, I understand what you're saying because we may have to look at it anyways, but at $200,000, reducing it that much, I mean, what would it almost be, let's wait a year. And the reason I say that is because I feel like we would be almost definitely looking at these rates again next year. And so that's kind of where I'm at, if you're going to reduce it by that much.
Another way to look at it is, and it's because of our capital projects that the citizens have voted on, we're going to be raising our millage rate. And raising millage rate and some of these fees at the same time, I'm sure that I'd be approached by citizens, why did you do both?
Well, one of the things that's you can justify on this is our solid waste program is set up in an enterprise fund, and it has to self-fund itself. So it's not supposed to be supplemented with taxes.
Right.
That's a good point.
Keep it viable, we're gonna have to.
And the school, local school of government, they might, if we did the fund balance, and it is an enterprise fund, if we went with the fund balance thought, we could forewarn them in our upcoming audit, that, tell our auditors that we're gonna use, we call it
So what'll happen, and again, Darlene, just jump in here, tell me when I'm wrong, but if you have a significant loss, okay, remember, we're not talking about this year, we're talking about next year, okay? So we're talking about a year from October. That's how far out we're talking about right now. If there's a significant loss in this enterprise fund, they will want to know what's going on. Meaning, now I don't think we'd necessarily immediately get an asset impairment, but it could raise elevation of just making sure they'd want to know what are we doing. That's why I'm saying if you drop, say, 600,000, let's just say this was correct, and you drop $600,000 next year, then in that audit next year, then ultimately we would have to talk about that, right? We'd have to tell them what your plan, and if we went and told them it was a planned fund balance reduction, then that would allow us to get through that audit. I guess what I have to stress to this board is that if we truly was losing that amount of money, you, you can obviously, but that just absolutely you have to look at rates next year, because if you don't, then what will happen is remember, this is so far ahead in advance that if we hit 2 years of this type of fund balance reduction, then that's going to cause us some problems. Right, that's going to cause us some problems with the local government commission who oversees it. They can understand the plan spend down, but for a year maybe. But if you start doing this for more than 1 year, then they're going to come back and they're going to have problems with this. And so that's that. So yes, Mark, you can do that. You put it on it, but I'm just telling you what it emphasizes. Next year, I'm standing here saying, because you don't, there may, there's not as many choices as you have this year.
Just for clarification, for the public's sake, if nothing else, when we're talking about the 1.5 on the fund balance, this is a fund balance within this enterprise fund
Correct.
for solid waste. This is not talking about our general fund balance.
Correct.
This is totally within the realm of just solid waste.
Correct. And so, these numbers are correct. I mean, where it starts getting a little worrisome is, if we start talking about losing $800,000 or $900,000 next year, then it starts getting significantly too close. So that's the only threat. If I knew that the $600,000 was absolutely what we were going to lose, then that's why I'm standing here with, yes, you could have a comfortable plan spend down on your fund balance. But that's where I keep going back and saying these are such unknowns at this point that there's not a perfect solution to this conversation. If you're asking me what the recommendation for rate hikes are, it's in this packet right here. If you are, I would not recommend reducing that down all the way down to $200,000. And the reason I say that is because it's the percentage of you needing to look at this again next year drastically increases. And I just say, why not just wait till next year if you're going to reduce it that much? So right now, I would recommend this level of increase or do a planned spend down.
Okay. How do y'all feel about it? Mark?
plan spend down.
Tom?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. Kind of stuck here.
I really don't know whether.
Yeah, do you?
I agree. Raising fees very much. Every fee that everybody's paying right now is raised.
It is.
And it's 6 million houses instead of paying much for everything, it's got the least two things. And if you listen to me this morning, it doesn't change. This thing about fuel is gonna get worse. And it's not gonna be over in a few months. If you hear back, I mean, this might be a 3 or 4 year thing. So it's
it's gonna be difficult for a long time.
Also add to that, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard also come into the DEF fluid. We're gonna be having a shortage of that, which is the diesel engine fluid
Yeah.
that you have to, I can't remember what year it is. I think it's like 92 or 98 or something.
Yeah.
All the diesels have to have DEF fluid added to the engine to keep down emissions. And without the DEF fluid, diesel engines will not run. So if that's the case, if we run out of DEF because I believe China is one of the biggest distributors of DEF fluid, and we're not getting along with them too well right now. So if they crush us with that, then that's gonna destroy the trucking industry, period. I mean, I don't know if that's true, I haven't, but you never know.
There's a lot of unknowns.
A lot of unknowns. I've also heard analysts say that fuel could go to $10 a gallon.
Very possible. I think what's challenging about this, and I will agree, I know while I say I'm recommending, my personal opinion is that we go with what the recommendation from staff is. But I don't want to have to raise rates on users any more than anyone else would. The reality is it's hard to pay. It's right now is a tough time in our economy, and it's tough on the folks that are going to be impacted. But at the same time, for the system to operate, it's either raise it now or we're going to raise it later. And potentially it could be even more next year. Who knows where we're going to be at next year? But I think the big unknown is when we're getting ready to go into a year where we're going to a contract. If our contract was good for another couple of years and we had some stability there, I might be more inclined to agree with what's been suggested. But with the big unknown, I think we have no choice but to react in a way that's going to be very conservative, because we don't know what's getting ready to happen from a contract standpoint and then from a fuel standpoint. To throw them both together, it really creates us a big issue.
Well, and I think you made an excellent point about the contracts. I can't imagine that they're not going to have a significant increase because of workforce issues. I mean, we've salaries have gone up. We've recognized the importance of keeping our valuable employees, and I'm sure these haulers and the recyclers and all are facing the same thing with their employees. And so those costs are going to go up. I guess I just lean toward being proactive, but I'll agree with whatever you go with.
We had a problem with last contract about fuel. You remember, Brian, we had we filled this room full here one night about it. And we thought about going up 10, 15 cents. Weren't we? Remember?
Remember?
Ms. Fox, you have two recommendations, in Mr. Adams. One is the fund spin down, and the other would be the addressing the various fees. If you were sitting up here, what would you think would be the best decision?
It's a good question, Mark.
Well, I'm recommending fee increase. We've looked at it, fuel's gone up 16 cents today. We don't know what the contracts are gonna come in at. We do know the SRC operations, equipment costs, and tipping fees. We know what they're gonna be, and that's over $200,000 for those.
Increase.
Right there.
We know that's gonna happen.
That's going to happen.
That's the increase.
The fuel's the only thing we're not certain of,
We know it's gonna go up.
but we know it's
We know
gonna go
that.
up.
It's up already.
Sure.
And I mean, when you're looking at an additional $80 a load for fuel surcharge, that adds up.
In a hurry.
These percentage of increases, and I am the first to admit I am not a math person, but if, just from looking at it and the differences, if we made it just a straight 15% increase for every category except campsites, hotels, and business, you know, the ones, apartment units, the residential units, if we made that 15% for everyone, would that be a more equitable increase for, you know, people
The
in,
majority of it still wanna come from that.
It's right there.
okay,
It's,
okay.
it's,
But also, if you went with Commissioner Woody's thought, it also affect the mobile home and apartments, too,
I
from
know.
that 28% to 15.
Just 15% there, I don't know.
But you're only looking at 1,500 units there.
The apartments, and
And
I'm,
as far as revenue, that's not significant, but for those families, it could be very significant. Just that much, I don't know.
And we looked at just having one availability fee like the other counties do.
Yeah,
And it was gonna come in at $144
Mhm.
to be able to, for us to fund everything.
right.
And
So-
you can see with the one bedroom, it would almost double.
Oh, that
So-
would be hard. That would be very hard.
So we did go back because other counties just do, there is some logic behind having an availability fee based upon the amount of bedrooms that you have. And so, we did look at that, but it would cause, the area that you're concerned, it would cause a bigger, if we made it equitable across the board, it would cause a bigger increase for that 2 to 3 bedroom. Instead of being 125, it would be 144.
And I'm, here again, I'm not trying to make light of this by no means, because money is money, and when you don't have any, it's tough
It
when you're
is,
trying to
yeah.
make ends meet. But we're talking about a $28 increase for one whole year for trash disposal. It's a one-time fee,
Time hit.
one-time fee of $28 increase.
It's $2 a month.
That's what we're talking about. It's not $28 a month or $28 a week. It's $28 one-time increase.
That makes it not so bad.
Yeah, that's true.
That's for the most. That's for the one that's got the most increase, the 28.87%. For everyone below that, it's even less than that.
would it be a fair statement to say most of those apartments, that 1,036, are in the Cullowhee area?
It would be.
And I'm surprised there's only 545 mobile homes in Jackson County.
Those numbers came from the tax office.
Yeah.
Wayne Smith has that.
Wayne Smith, that's it. I'll bet he does. Yeah. I'll bet he's got more than that.
Well, I think we should go ahead, but you,
Unless someone has another suggestion, I mean, staff's recommendation is to go with these proposed rate increases.
Well, after you broke it down, like I said, it's not as bad as I thought it was anyway, so, I mean, I'm okay with it now.
All for the question.
Consensus, move forward with the proposed increase, Tom,
Yes, sir.
Mark,
Yes.
Gail,
yes.
Lois.
I don't know.
All right, I'll say yes too.
It's hard.
George Gill now.
We're good.
Mad, we'll just blame it on Gail.
Oh, and wait, there's 5 of us.
Just kidding.
If you thought that was difficult, $28 increase.
Oh,
Wait till we
dear.
talk about the next one.
All right, here we go.
All right. Okay. So I tried to share some of this information. As everybody is aware, we did open bids last week for the Aquatic Center. And so if the board will just bear with me, I'm just going to try to go through a series of information. I'll try to go through all the tabs just to let you know the information I'm providing to you and the request recommendations, and then I'll turn it over to the board for obviously discussions and eventual consensus of direction one way or another. So what you do have enclosed in your packets under this is today is I did get Clark Nixon to give a bid tabulation sheet, and the as indicated in the bid tab sheet, New Atlantic Contracting is the apparent low bidder. And as you can see, when you read through this, there are multitudes of alternates that were also included in this bid. The base bid of $20,657,000 was the low bid. And then obviously you see alternate one, that is the pavement of the new parking area, and that was put up as an alternate. Alternate two was the scoreboard upgrade to turn it into the LED type of scoreboard. Alternate three was tile on the pool deck itself. Alternate four is the seat walls, the seats that are outside that are built into the exterior of the building, so you have a place to sit when you're waiting to get picked up. If you recall us talking about that. Alternate five was the paving of the fire lane. There's a fire lane that was required to be built that goes behind the facility itself, and alternate five paves it. Alternate six and seven, no cost difference. Alternate M2, fabric ductwork. We have a choice to take a deduction of $25,000 to have the overhead exposed ductwork made of fabric versus metal. And then the next alternate is the solar PV system of $115,000. You can see the architect's total there on the next page is actually adding all those alternates into the base bid and taking the deduct from of the $25,000 and taking the metal HVAC ductwork and turn it into a fabric. I'm gonna discuss that a little bit in the future here. And so if you just go down, he explains everything, and then he also provides. We did receive 4 bids. He does provide us the actual tab sheet itself. And so the good news, obviously the bad news is the bids didn't come in as low as we wanted. The good news is we did get 4 bids, and the bids were relatively close. That's always a good sign. Because if you have a bid that's extremely low, and maybe the 3 other bids are just way higher, 20-30% higher, that drastically increases the chances that the contractor missed something. It could cause problems potentially in the actual construction period. So if you go through and look at the base bids and the alternates, you can see that it's relatively a close bid itself. The next page is the summary that I provided to board members individually. And this is the summary of the Aquatic Center budget requirements. And as you can see, I start off with the $20,657,000. We are requesting that the board consider all the alternates. And that total alternates would be $517,000. All the alternates except for the $25,000 deduct. It really is. It's taking in the overhead. You have to put a fan on it. It's just literally the best way I can explain it is a bouncy house. So when I talk to the architect, you have to put a fan in it, and that's what keeps these large ductworks open. And we did talk to Rusty. Did talk to Watauga County, and they said they were working okay, but they have had some stains. They've had a tear in it, and it's ongoing maintenance. This ductwork's going to be really high in the air, and honestly, I would request us to spend the $25,000 and have standard steel ductwork up there that you can go back and clean and maintain and things of that nature. So we are requesting all the alternates and not to take the $25,000 deduct. We are in the building a 3% contingency of $635,220. So that makes the total construction cost up to $21,809,220. There are other costs associated with this project. So that's the actual, most people want to know what the pool costs to construct. That's the cost of construction. But as you know, we have other costs associated with this project. And that is, we've got an estimated cost of $115,000 for the loan closing. We have the 1,487,488 architect and initial engineering. And just a reminder, we've spent over $1 million in that at this point, getting us to this point. $300,000 placeholder for geotech and special inspections. $246,400 for furniture and equipment. And $223,200 for technology. That's for, now when we build facilities, we put out cameras, we have our card swipes and things of that nature as far as getting into the facility itself. So that subtotal of those additional costs is $2,372,088. So the total requested project budget is $24,181,308. The proposed revenues to be made available for this project budget is $20 million in the GEO bond, the $1,487,488. That is something that the board has already transferred out of our general fund dollars into a project fund. And what I'm requesting is that the county not reimburse itself with the loan proceeds. Originally, if everything came in on budget, you would borrow the money and then reimburse yourself for these costs. Ultimately, if you scroll on down, that leaves an additional $2,693,820 needed to proceed forward with this project. So even though we've already cashed $1,487,488, at the end of the day, to proceed forward with this project, the board will have to approve using $4,181,308 of general fund dollars, because you're borrowing $20 million and the rest of it would come out of cash from the general fund. So I just want to make sure you've already cashed a portion of it. You'd have to come up with additional $2.693 million. But ultimately, this is cashing $4,181,308. I'm going to stop there because at this point, I do have other information that we can go through and talk about how I would propose to cash it. I wanted to see if there's any questions about the bids, any questions about the information provided at this point. Like I say, the next section is going to be talking about, it is being proposed to cash this with additional sales tax and property tax dollars. Before I get to that,
Any questions about the bids or how do we got to these numbers, how these numbers were accumulated? Okay, let's move on to the next section then.
Okay.
Where is that company, New Atlantic?
I think it said Winston-Salem.
Winston-Salem. And the architect has actually worked with that company, is comfortable working with this company. He also has followed up with, looked at the subcontractors, looked at the main thing he wanted to look at was the subcontractor for the pool itself, because you want to make sure that you have experience, pool contract. You can have HVAC people and other types of people, but you really want experienced people when it comes to actually pouring the pool, doing all the plaster work, things of that nature. And he was comfortable with that, with the subcontractor. So the next item, 3B, is really talking about just trying to go through how it's being proposed to fund this project. And so what I put in here first is an item that's already been adopted by the Board of Commissioners. So this is what I wanted to show you, that the $1,487,488, I need to look down on the paper, not up there, 488, that is something that you had to go ahead and adopt and put the money in place so that we could go through all of the architect, engineering, design work, bidding, and so forth. And this is where we've already spent over $1 million of these funds themselves. So if you go to the next page, this is something that Darlene had put together. Ultimately, what we would request is that we are going to, if you recall, let's talk a little bit about our fund balance conversations and about how it was projected to fund things like our salary study and how to fund the additional costs for the rescue squad building, all those items. If you recall, when I presented to this board, initially when I presented, I thought it may require a tax increase. But when I actually presented to you, the only real tax increase was associated with this pool debt. And I presented a budget to you that did not require tax increases for all these other expenses. That was due to because we were getting increased revenues from property taxes and growth and increased revenues from sales tax. Well, that doesn't just start July 1. We've been seeing those increases this fiscal year. And so ultimately, that's the reason I sit there and say it's being proposed to fund this out of sales tax and property tax dollars. And if you didn't, what it would do is just build our fund balance. If we didn't use it for this, what would happen is at the end of the year, your fund balance would increase. So yes, we're using sales tax and property tax dollars for this, but it's really almost, if we would have done this August 1st, we would be saying it's a fund balance expenditure versus property tax and sales tax, if that makes any sense. And so you see what Darlene has put together. As you can see, I'll start at the revenue side below. As you can see, the taxes increased to 2.5 million, property taxes to 1.4 million, and sales tax is to utilize those increases to help offset this one-time cost. Remember, we're utilizing these increases next year to help us. Like I say, we didn't look at taxes for the Silva Fire Department, things of that nature. We're utilizing these additional funds to help us with those costs next year. And then you can see right there when you look at tax refunds to the schools, and the Articles 40 and 42, what that is that's breaking out what's mandatory to go to the schools. Remember, yes, we see an increase in our sales tax, but a portion of it has to go to schools themselves. And then you can see we're also looking at the, hold on, I clicked it accidentally, excuse me. Did I close that? I did, didn't I? All right. And so ultimately, when you're down here, this Article 40, 42, that's what we're looking at there is those revenues, breaking out the sales tax for the school systems themselves. And then ultimately, it's also allowing for us to decrease our fund balance allocation this year. So the expenditures would be the transfer to the indoor pool facility fund in the amount of the $2,693,820. That's what was just previously discussed. And then you look at the transfer to the school cap reserve funds. Remember, because we're breaking out the percentages of those sales tax that has to go to the schools. And then there is one added component here is transferring this year an additional $500,000 to the Conservation Preservation Recreation Fund. Now, I'm going to show you later why we're asking you to do that, because if you do that, that's going to allow not only for this to be funded, but for us to proceed forward with the two projects that I believe this board was interested in proceeding forward with, and that's building of some parks. And so that is part of how it's being proposed to fund this. If you scroll down to the next page, what this is doing is this would be a project ordinance amendment. This first one was a general fund ordinance. This is what we're doing with our additional revenues. This next one is dealing with the project ordinance, and this is transferring all the funds into the project ordinance that we just talked about. And now it looks like the project would be $22,693,820, but that's how much being transferred into the fund. So that when you do that, I'm going to just go ahead and scroll down. Your new project ordinance will look like this. Okay. If you recall, before your project ordinance only had the $1,487,488 in it. Now you just transferred another $22 million into it, which puts the entire budget at $24 million. Get through it here so I can see it. $181,308, which is the requested budget for this project.
Mr. Adams, that's Article 46. It only had about under $500,000 in it. Is that a time period, the slide or two before?
That's additional money that we are expecting by the end of this fiscal year for that Article 46.
Okay.
more than we budgeted.
So that will increase when we start doing our long-term, our 5-year plan for the schools and education. That will increase that 5-year look at those funds also. And so that is ultimately taking us through the proposed funding mechanism. And the last thing I have to show you is just some updated versions of how we would pay for some parks coming. And so if the board wishes, I'll just continue on with that, and then I'll turn it back over to you for questions. So we'll go to 3C. 3C, if you go back to the budget presentation, the budget message, if you recall, there are several items that as this board goes forward and does your next 5-year capital improvement plan, we need to do one for the county and also one for the schools. There were several items or projects that I recommended that we proceed forward with. And if you recall, those were, if you chose to move forward with this project, that was the debt service for this project. That $1.9 million debt service. The other project was moving forward with the domestic violence shelter. And then the other two projects to move forward with was the Whittier or Paula Whittier Park. Because if you recall, we've got a part of the application that this board approved to submit in for a $500,000 grant. But then there's also the project of trying to move forward about acquiring architectural services for the splash pad in the cashier's area. And those were the 4 projects that I'd mentioned in my budget message. So that's the reason I'm going back and looking at these 2 projects of how they may or may not be impacted by these decisions. And as you can see, what is needed potentially for both these projects is $2.7 million. Now, we do receive the $500,000 part of grant. That would reduce down to the $2.2 million. So I'll just go ahead and scroll to the next page. So I had Darlene revise this lookout on these revenues. Now, this is our CPR fund, and that 821 right there includes the $500,000 that I just showed you that we're asking you to transfer into that fund. All right. Then we will have $780,000 out of our cap reserve fund available this year. So at the end of this year, we're projecting to have $1.6 million available. And then next year, if you recall, we're budgeting $500,000 again for CPR, but we're using about $120,000 for other recreational needs. And we've got budgeted $1 million next year for our capital funds, our capital expenditures. And that's another 1.38 million. So by the end of next year, we would have 2.981 million available. And so if I go back up, that if we don't get the part of grant, our cost is projected to be 2.7. If we do get the part of grant, our cost is projected to be 2.2. So by going ahead and transferring that extra $500,000 into that CPR fund, that puts us in a position to continue forward with those 2 parks. Now, what that would do is as we continue in August and September to go and develop our 5-year plan, our 5-year plan now really needs to start 23-24 on, because that's when new additional funds would be, or excuse me, right here, new additional funds would be available for our capital planning. Now, remember, there's a secondary capital planning, and that's for education. That's not part of this conversation at this point. And then the other thing, just wanted to remind everybody, everything that we're looking to do when we're talking about, we're transferring the growth from this year to help fund this project. Our fund balance, if you transfer that growth, is still going to be around a little less than $6 million. That's actually better than what you saw at our planning meeting, because if you recall, we had about $500,000 come out of this going for the pool project. But that what it does is it leaves your fund balance still additional funds above the 25% minimum of around $6 million. So that allows you, when you do your 5-year plan, right, when you start planning out from 23-24 on, projects other than the Whittier and the splash pad, then that leaves available these new funds and potentially part of this fund balance to have those conversations. So we are still in a position to talk about that. You know, generally speaking, we like to fund in this county. Well, generally, we can save and fund projects anywhere from $7 to $8 million or less. You start getting above that, we either have to save for a lot longer or we generally start going to debt solutions. And so that still puts you in a position to look at projects like that, other projects in your planning process. Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
that's all the information.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Is we know that the pool total cost is 24,181,308,
Correct.
and we're going to borrow 20 million on bonds, and the additional needed would come from the current general fund. It does not require any tax increase, and it does not affect our fund balance.
If that is correct, it does not affect this number. If you did not spend the money that we're asking you to transfer, that number would increase by $2.6 million.
So let me repeat that. If we chose to fund this program, we're not raising taxes any more than what's being projected in the current budget
Correct. For the debt
for
service.
the debt service, which the citizens voted on. We're not negatively impacting services in the county on any other budgetary item,
No, sir.
and we're not affecting our fund balance.
25%.
The 25%.
That's correct.
We'll fully fund the program if we chose to move forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's, that's better than I thought we would face.
So the question is, do we want to move forward?
So now, we were hoping to build this pool for $20 million.
Or less, yeah.
And now do we even know that this is absolute, it's gonna be 24 million?
It's the actual bids are in, and that it will be the contract amount of the 21,174,000. As long as I can stay hopefully within that contingency, then yes, yes,
So then, it's gonna cost us 20% more to build this pool than what we thought it was gonna cost.
yes,
Correct?
yes.
And we're not gonna have to raise taxes, do it?
Other than the 1.6 for the debt, yes, sir.
This is tax money we're gonna be spending.
Yes, sir.
It's not just come out of there.
No?
You know, it's real money. It's real tax money.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't, I mean, remember some conversation that the $20 million bond was going to be, per the millage rate, a little over 2 cents.
Yeah, the original estimate was around 2.2, I think, somewhere in there.
2.2, and it's going to come into a half a penny less.
Almost, yes, sir. It was like 1.67 or something, and then it's a 2 cent tax increase, yes, sir.
Which is a good thing.
It'll end up, when it's all effectively done, we'll end up utilizing that full 2 cents when we have have to operate the facility.
But as Chairman Matt Mahan mentioned, the citizens knew that when we voted. It was clear that there would be, and actually it's going to be less than what they voted on. So that's a very positive thing.
So I guess, like I said, the question is, do we want to proceed forward? Give us, before we even poll the board and ask that question, give us the next steps. What is the
Okay.
process and the timeline?
So the next steps is tomorrow at your regularly scheduled board meeting, you do have the resolution that's in your agenda packets that if voted upon, it authorizes the actual sale of those bonds that are scheduled to occur June 16th. Okay. What I would also ask the board at that time is to go ahead and vote and authorize me to send a letter that we're looking to also commit $4,183,308, because the reason I asked for that is that this item is scheduled to appear before the LGC for final approval Tuesday week, whatever date is that, the 14th? 14th. Okay, and so ultimately, assuming that the board moves forward Tuesday with those two votes, then the LGC takes this issue up on the 14th. If this board chooses to move forward, if you recall, you were scheduled to have a special called meeting on the 14th. Excuse me, a special called meeting on the 14th to pass the budget, which would have this debt service in it. Ultimately, that resolution tomorrow allows us to close the loan on June 16th. And then what would appear before this board on June 21st is this project ordinance. Because what at that point is you'll have a budget adopted that has the debt service in place. We'll have the loan approved and already closed. So all these revenues that we're counting on would be in place. And then all these transfers that you see right here would appear before you on June 21st. And if you move forward with that, right behind this, I would request the board to approve the contract, the construction contract. And then we would need to sign off on the construction contract that week, and everything would move forward.
I can make sure I got the numbers straight in my head. So we would take the $2.5 million out of the fund balance and for these extra costs, and it would leave us the 25% and almost $6 million in the fund balance.
No, the $6 million represents how much you have. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the way you said it's correct. It's how much you have, 25% plus the $6 million. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
So the official vote will take place tomorrow.
Yes.
We come back and convene our official business meeting. Today is just to receive this information, but still, if there's questions or concerns or ultimately we need to decide to move forward or not, and that official vote will take place tomorrow. But I'm personally am comfortable with moving forward. I know it's way more than what we anticipated, but so is everything else that we've tried to accommodate and plan for. We've not found anything yet that's come under budget in this last couple of years with the thing that's going on, but
Cheaper. It's just gonna keep going up. And how long's this been in the works?
this is the last piece of the
Been in for a
recreation master
long
plan.
time.
Years.
Yeah. And you
Well,
already
and-
we got over
yeah.
$1 million pumped in it already. We back out, we lose all that.
Well, and the other thing, we've been so blessed as a community to have that million something in tax revenue, sales tax revenue, that allows us to have this cushion, as well as the other tax, I forgot,
Growth.
thank you.
Ad
And
valorem
so
growth.
those two ad valorem, so we have those two situations. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to move forward like we had hoped. So we're very fortunate. The one thing that I don't know how we can do this, except to keep repeating it, but there's still a lot of misinformation in the community that we are raising taxes to pay for the fire district in Silva. That's been in the pay, there's been just some misinformation out there. How can we clearly let people know that the only increase in their taxes is a direct result on what was voted on?
Just make that statement.
You just did.
I hope the news media is listening.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, is it I mean, ultimately, for the board members to tell us, because what happens tomorrow, it literally is a chain reaction, and I'm looking to try to proceed forward with moving
Well, a
things.
consensus vote right now that, here again, this is not a binding vote. It's just purely a show of hands to see how we stand so that staff can be prepared for what's going to take place tomorrow evening. I'll be glad to go first. Like I said, I'm fully comfortable with moving forward with what's being proposed by staff to fund it. Others want to start? Tom, do you want to go?
I'm comfortable also, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, I, as well.
We'll sleep on it. Okay.
Okay,
Other items?
yes, sir. Are we ready for the next item?
Ready.
All right. Thank you. Okay, the next item is in regards to nonprofit request update. I would defer to Ms. Fox here to let you know, we do have some additional requests and some follow-up requests from nonprofits.
Okay, I got 2 additional applications in, one from the farmer's market. It's for $10,000. It's a reduction of $5,000 from last year. We funded them $15,000. And then the Watershed Association of Tuckasegee River, they requested $32,400. In the budget, we had made arrangements for $23,000, which was the same funding they got this year for water.
Which,
So we would need to add the 10,000 for the farmer's market if you would like to do that.
Did the application from water specify what the increase was for?
They haven't finished up all that they've done the current year, and it was increased because of that.
I see. Because they're doing more testing, I know that,
So-
of water quality.
so what we left in there was what we done for all the other
Right.
nonprofits, which basically kept level funding.
Mhm.
Is the board okay with putting the 10,000 in for the farmer's market?
You object to the 10,000 for farmer's market?
No, I think it's good.
No.
Okay.
That's all I have on nonprofits.
So, Mr. Chairman, from staff standpoint, that concludes everything. The other business is really, as far as budget goes, is really turned over to the board to see if there are any other issues or business.
Any other questions or concerns about the budget? I mean, we're getting down to the very last. I think we set aside this date, this special call meeting, to address any major changes, because here again, 1 week from tomorrow, we'll be in a position to formally adopt this budget.
Yes, sir.
And that gives staff a chance to make any final changes. If I don't hear any other recommended changes or questions, do I hear a motion that we adjourn the work session?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.